Resuming the adjourned budget debate, I recognize the member for Fredericton South and leader of his party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House today to respond to the speech on the budget. I want to respectfully recognize, to begin with, that we are gathered here on the unsurrendered and unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Wolastoqiyik, the Mi'kmaq, and the Passamaquoddy first signed with the British Crown in 1725. And treaties do not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but establish the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between peoples, government to government. L'engagement des gouvernements successifs en faveur de la déréglementation, de la privatisation et de la réduction du rôle de l'État dans l'économie a provoqué trois crises croisées dans le domaine des soins de santé, du logement et du climat. Ces crises représentent un échec aux proportions épiques pour servir le bien commun. Mr. Speaker, to address these crises in healthcare, housing, and our climate, we need a budget to launch us on the road to transformative change. It needs to be bold, it needs to be visionary, and it needs to be courageous. When a rapidly heating planet delivers heavy rains to our province, flooding our neighbors' homes and damaging our roads and sewer systems, we all pay the price through increased insurance rates, through the increased costs of repairing roads and sewers, and through the strain on our social fabric. With the high price of vehicles these days, the growing cost of gasoline, and given driving is a significant contributor to our climate crisis, there needs to be a convenient alternative to driving. There's not. When someone languishes on the waiting list for a family doctor or nurse practitioner with 50,000 other people, we all pay the price. When a family member sits in an emergency department waiting waiting room, watching the ambulances come and go as all the seats get filled and the clock marks off 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 all hours, we all pay the price. When someone's mental illness is left undiagnosed or untreated, we all pay the price, and sometimes they pay the ultimate price. If unaffordable rent increases force children and their families, or elderly couples, or the disabled out of their homes, where do they go? Where do they go? The supply of affordable rentals continues to shrink as the market favors high-end apartments, leaving the vanquished nowhere to live. Children can be taken by child protection from their mothers. The dementia of frail seniors can deteriorate rapidly, and a spiral into deep poverty can sometimes be the outcome. If one family is housing insecure, we all pay the price. Ce sont les priorités urgentes que j'espérais voir dans ce budget. Au lieu de cela, c'est un budget de petites mesures, une petite dépense par-ci, une petite dépense par-là pour laisser croire qu'il s'attaque aux grands problèmes auxquels nous sommes confrontés en tant que province. Mais ce n'est pas sérieux. Each of these priorities is complex and multifaceted. There is no magic bullet solution to solve them, but bold solutions are required, and we need a budget to implement them. To suggest otherwise is simply magical thinking, like cutting property taxes for property developers is going to reverse the declining supply of affordable housing. The gradual evolution of the climate crisis, Madam Speaker, has enabled successive premiers and their cabinets to ignore it for decades. But here we are living with the consequences in the present. We have extreme temperature fluctuations all year long, giving us crumbling roads, and now we get these big rains which cause the kind of flooding that wreak havoc with homes and public infrastructure. We're experiencing extreme heat that undermines the health of the elderly and the homeless, and along our coast, the land is eroding away from storm surges and rising sea levels, so much so that even the Chignecto Isthmus is now in danger of being inundated. In the face of inaction on climate, we all pay the price. This budget pretends that we don't need to respond to the climate crisis, that it's not something the government has to deal with. The budget offers no clear direction on how the revenue from the carbon tax will be used to fight energy poverty, for example, to make the transition to renewable energy, to create a convenient alternative to driving with public transit in rural and urban areas, or how we will fund our share of the Atlantic Loop to take advantage of the renewable hydroelectricity available from Quebec and Labrador. There's no commitment to carry out a climate risk assessment for New Brunswick, so we know where the money could most be effectively invested to ensure New Brunswick families, communities, and our provincial infrastructure are climate ready. Safeguarding the Chenectado Isthmus alone by itself is going to cost between $200 and $300 million. So we need to know where to prioritize the investments in protecting our families, communities, and infrastructure from calamities. The Auditor General recently reported to the Public Accounts Committee that MB Power's energy efficiency programs are not designed to help New Brunswickers cut their greenhouse gas emissions. They're not designed to help New Brunswickers escape energy poverty. No. We've got too many New Brunswickers living in drafty, poorly insulated homes with windows that readily frost up, leaving heating systems to warm the planet more than the people living inside those homes. Meanwhile, renewable energy development is the fastest growing source of new generation around the world, Madam Speaker, but not in New Brunswick. Shame. Le Comité permanent sur le changement climatique a tenu des audiences sur les mesures à prendre pour renforcer le plan d'action sur le climat. Mais le budget ne reconnaît pas la mise à jour du plan d'action sur le climat, sans parler de sa mise en œuvre. Incroyable. The carbon tax, according to the budget, will generate $170 million this year, but only $47 million of it will be committed to expenditures on climate-related initiatives. That's not much more than 25%. In fact, $14 million of it will go to subsidize fossil fuel consumption in the form of natural gas. Yeah, the money we're paying on carbon taxes to try and get us off carbon is being turned around to help subsidize keeping us on carbon fuel. Where is the sense in that, Madam Speaker? It's irresponsible in the face of crisis. Where is the investment in the budget in fighting energy poverty and improving energy efficiency? Where is the investment in making the transition to renewable energy? Where is the investment in the Atlantic Loop? Madam Speaker, the budget fails to bring about the transformative changes needed to ensure every New Brunswicker has access to a family health care team. Where is the investment? Where is the investment in, to hire nurses? Where is the investment, Madam Speaker, to hire nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, to transform family practices into team-based practices? Where is the commitment to finally end the obligations family doctors must take on to work in our hospitals, keeping them away from their patients? Where is the commitment to hire enough hospitalists to make that even possible? The pandemic has revealed how our healthcare system is unraveling. It shone a light on the significant number of New Brunswickers with chronic diseases who continue to be hit hard with COVID. Among the 16 people who died from COVID last week, 2 were in their 40s, Madam Speaker. This budget fails to put a priority on preventative health care, on the transformative health policies that would bring about a healthier population and better manage chronic conditions, including mental illness. Nous avons maintenant 50 000 personnes sur la liste d'attente pour un médecin ou une infirmière praticien. Une augmentation massive par rapport aux 35 000 personnes sur la liste d'attente en juin dernier. Où est le sentiment d'urgence ici, Madame le Président? The budget is silent on ensuring everyone has access to emergency health care services when they need them. Instead, we have ambulances backed up in hospital laneways and patients lined up in hallways or stuck in the limbo of the waiting rooms of our ERs for the better part of a day or for an entire night. How is it that the proposals by doctors and nurses to solve the serious problems in our hospitals never land, but bounce back to them, ignored. It says to me that local decision-making authority has been usurped by remote managers and centralized administrators. Hospitals are understaffed, burning out those on the job. It's not just that we have difficulty in recruiting nurses and doctors. We're losing them. They're leaving. So where are the bold policies, Madam Speaker, to put the community back into health care, decentralize decision-making, and empower our doctors, nurses, and technologists to help solve the problems? They've got all kinds of great proposals for solutions, Madam Speaker, but every time they move them up the line to the health authorities, they come bouncing back. Despite unanimous support from all members in the legislature to create the position of a mental health advocate, there's still is no commitment in this budget to do so. The mental health and addictions budget combined is only increasing by $1.9 million. It's peanuts compared to the need. The Minister of Finance tells us that the government is going to get tough on drug crime, but then doesn't tell us what proportion of that $1.9 million will be spent on addiction services. And where's the commitment to establish mental health courts in Moncton, in Fredericton, in Bathurst, and elsewhere in the province? It's unfair that only those in St. John have access to a mental health court, which effectively diverts them from incarceration into care. That should be available to people whether they're in Edmundston or Moncton, Fredericton or St. Stephen, Caraquet or Campbellton. After the tragic shootings of Rodney Levi and Chantal Moore, why does the budget not provide the funding we need to turn the mobile mental health response teams that exist in the province into 24/7 mental health first responders? Are you kidding me? After those deaths, while police continue to respond to mental health calls and wellness checks alone, when the mobile health teams are closed for the night or off in some other part of the province because there's inadequate staff to cover the geography they're responsible for? Shameful. Les maladies mentales et les dépendances étant plus nombreuses après 2 ans de COVID, il est urgent de réagir, mais ce budget fait à peine un signe de tête dans cette direction. Ironically, the most welcome initiative announced in this budget is not a budgetary measure at all, but a change in heart, a change in policy. The Premier and Cabinet finally abandoned their conviction that the market will take care of people's housing without government intervention. This is welcome news. But, Madam Speaker, the rent cap needs to be imposed now, and it needs to become a permanent policy. Change of heart, however, Madam Speaker, is not extended to addressing the shrinking supply of affordable housing. The idea that the cut in property taxes this budget provides property developers is going to lead to growth in the supply of affordable apartments is nothing more than magical thinking. The profits are in the upscale market: granite countertops, walk-in shower rooms, and multiple bathrooms in an apartment. There are cranes sprouting up in Fredericton monthly to build such apartments. In fact, in the first 6 months of last year, more than 340 new apartments and townhouse units were under construction in the capital city, but they'll be unaffordable to all too many. This tax cut will simply improve the bottom line of the developers and accelerate the conversion of existing affordable housing that still remains into high-end housing. The minister announced in his budget an additional, $6.3 million for affordable housing. $6.3 million. At best, that's enough to build 39 units for the entire province. It's not enough. It's not even a start. The money that's being used notably to cut property taxes, $45 million to cut property taxes for commercial property owners and industrial facilities, needs to be used to build affordable housing. How can that be used, Madam Speaker? Well, you know what? We need the New Brunswick Housing Corporation back in place. When you look at the first 3 years of the Canada-New Brunswick Housing Agreement, New Brunswick committed to building 151 affordable units by the end of this month. In those first 3 years, it's not a lot. 151 units in the first 3 years of the agreement. How many have we got after 3 years? 29 have been completed, Madam Speaker. 29. Now, there are 122. There are 122 that we're told will be completed by the end of this year. But considering there are 7,000 households waiting for subsidized housing, getting one of these few units to rent will be like winning the lottery, Madam Speaker. So, given the record in terms of slowness in getting affordable units built, Madam Speaker, a bold move by the Minister of Social Development, by the Premier, would be to extract the New Brunswick Housing Corporation from social development and restore it to its original purpose. As a Crown Corporation, it was created to support the building of non-market affordable housing, built by government, built by non-profits, built by cooperatives, with financing provided through the province by the New Brunswick Housing Corporation, financial capital, loans, mortgages, as mandated in the New Brunswick Housing Act. The New Brunswick Housing Corporation successfully carried our province through the last rental housing crisis that existed well into the 1980s. It was successful, proven track record. A lot of affordable housing got built. A lot of people were housed, Madam Speaker, and we need to reactivate the New Brunswick Housing Corporation for that purpose again. Financing cooperative and non-profit housing, that's what it's set up to do. Building affordable housing itself, that's what it's set up to do. It's the purpose. It's the purpose the New Brunswick Housing Act gives to this Crown Corporation. But it's not being operated like a Crown Corporation, Madam Speaker. It's simply on paper and in legalities. It sits there. The ministers, the CEO, the deputy ministers, the vice, and public servants make up the rest of the board. Putting it into cryogenic sleep 20 years ago was a huge mistake when you look at where we are today. But that could be changed. Il est temps que le gouvernement rétablisse son rôle dans le marché de l'habitation, qu'il embauche un PDG et du personnel et qu'il le laisse s'acquitter de mandat que lui confère la loi. Il est temps que le Premier ministre intervienne dans ce secteur de l'économie avec la Société d'habitation du Nouveau-Brunswick pour corriger cet échec massif de marché. C'est la façon d'offrir des logements abordables hors marché à ceux qui en ont besoin. Je ne vois pas cela dans le budget. Madam Speaker, this budget fails to increase income assistance above the rate of inflation. It doesn't even include the modest $100 a month advocated by the Common Front for Social Justice for social assistance recipients. Nor does it completely abolish the household income policy, but holds on to some pieces of it that will continue to cause grief for the disabled of this province. The budget offers no clear direction on how the Premier and Cabinet intend to fight poverty. And, Madam Speaker, incremental change will not do it. Transformative change is required to lift people out of poverty. It's time for a guaranteed livable income. That will be bold. That would be innovative. Greens have suggested it be implemented in phases, beginning with those living with disabilities, first phase, and then move on to others. This is what the budget needed to include that would set us down the path to transformational change, to truly fight poverty, to perhaps imagine a day in New Brunswick without poverty. What we have learned over the past 2 years, navigating the uncharted waters of the COVID-19 pandemic, is that we can successfully confront a crisis. Government can do that. The lesson here, though, is it takes political will. There was political will, Madam Speaker, to confront the COVID crisis, though the lack of any budgeted funds for COVID in this budget is a bit disconcerting. That said, this budget, when you look at it, tells me that the Premier and Cabinet lack the political will to confront the multiple crises we face: the climate crisis, crisis in health care, and the crisis in affordable housing. People are suffering around this province, Madam Speaker, in so many ways. The bankers may not think so on Bay Street or Wall Street, but we know it. As MLAs, we know it because those folks are in our offices weekly, bringing their concerns to us, pleas for help. And the system is not delivering that help. This budget doesn't deliver that help. Comme dans le cas de la pandémie, nous devons faire preuve de créativité et mettre en œuvre des solutions avec un sentiment d'urgence qui était auparavant considéré comme impossible. This is how we will ensure that every New Brunswicker, that every community will be protected from and prepared for the worst of the consequences of climate change. This is how we will ensure that we can make a just transition to a renewable energy system and a public transportation system by design, not by disaster, Madam Speaker, through planning, by design. You can't bring about a transition if you don't plan for it. You certainly can't bring about a just transition if you don't plan for it. And you can be assured that if that transition is forced upon us by disaster, it will not be just, it will not be appropriate, and a lot of people will pay the price. Madam Speaker, it's planning that will ensure that every New Brunswicker has access to timely medical care and that their health care workers are not compromising their own physical and mental health in caring for ours. It takes political will to do that. It takes political will to ensure that every New Brunswicker has a safe, affordable place to call home. And I just don't see that in this budget. This is a budget of small measures when we need bold ideas and policies that launch us down the road to transformative change in health care, in energy production and use, in transportation, and in housing. The same, Madam Speaker, could be said for the revenue side of this budget. There's nothing bold or visionary about tax cuts. Who isn't seduced by seemingly cost-free, pain-free tax cuts? It's a populist thing to do, Madam Speaker. But for what purpose? There needs to be a purpose. Notre système d'évaluation et d'imposition des biens immobiliers doit être transformé, mais cela nécessite une réflexion claire avec des buts et des objectifs réels. Why is property assessment and taxation so inconsistent? Why should the value of homes and apartments rise because of speculation, not because of improvements to them? Why does heavy industry get a break on property taxes when their sales decline? Why does the break become entrenched long after those sales recover? Using that logic, why shouldn't someone get a break on their property taxes in the home when they're out of a job? They don't have the money anymore to cover all their costs. Big industry gets a break on their property taxes when their sales go down, but if a New Brunswicker, a citizen of this province, loses work, has a hard time paying their bills, their property taxes don't change, not one iota. This budget leaves the inequities in the property tax system intact. You got to ask, why should real estate investment trusts be excused from paying income tax? There's been a lot of talk about property taxes being paid by property developers and owners, but the so-called REITs don't pay income tax. Why do large corporate apartment owners pay proportionally less income tax than the small landlords? How is that fair? What about these corporations who shelter their wealth offshore to evade taxes? How is that good for New Brunswick? Why would the government continue to provide public money to assist such companies that don't pay their fair share of taxes in New Brunswick? Our timber royalty system was left untouched by this budget, ensuring that money continues to be lost on the Crown timber clear-cut from the Crown lands, which at the same time is degrading the public purse, degrades our forest. And it ensures the price for private wood remains depressed, cutting into the livelihoods of woodlot owners and private wood producers. Il s'agit de terres qui n'ont jamais été cédées ou abandonnées par les Premières Nations, et une grande partie d'entre elles font maintenant l'objet d'une revendication de titre global. Madam Speaker, we do need tax reform. We do need royalty reform. We need to reform the timber royalties so that they serve the common good, not vested interests. Instead, this budget delivers tax cuts without objectives other than to respond to the lobbying of those vested interests. The Green Caucus held 2 virtual public budget consultations during the month of February to seek public input on this provincial budget. One was held in English and l'autre en français. I want to tell you a little bit of what we heard. Widespread concern was expressed that the budget must prioritize improving the well-being of New Brunswickers. Concerns, however, were raised for seniors needing care and the costs they bear, for children and youth struggling with their mental health, for the deterioration of health care, for people and families living in poverty, and for those who are housing insecure due to unaffordable rent increases and a shrinking supply. Fewer and fewer every day of affordable housing units. De nombreuses personnes ont soulevé les besoins de prendre des mesures significatives pour faire la transition vers une société et une économie verte. Les priorités comprennent l'établissement d'un système de transport public qui dessert efficacement les zones rurales et urbaines du Nouveau-Brunswick afin de réduire la dépendance à l'égard des véhicules privés et de plus en plus coûteux. With respect to energy, the need to rapidly transition to renewable energy sources was highlighted, recognizing the urgency of responding to the climate crisis. In terms of economic development, there was a strong demand for the budget to support more equitable and regional economic development that meets people's needs while maintaining nature's balance. The people who spoke on those town halls didn't see any kind of inconsistency of doing both. Held up against the input our caucus received, this budget is truly one of small measures, Madam Speaker. We don't see what the people we heard from, their concerns reflected in the budget. It's not a budget that represents transformational change, Madam Speaker, which is what we need. It doesn't start us down the road in that direction. It's designed, really, to appear that it's responding to the crises we face, the challenges before us, without actually doing so in a meaningful way. In fact, what it does is what the Premier has always railed against: a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, a little bit of money over there, to make it seem like you're doing something, when you're really not doing anything fundamental, significant, that is going to dramatically improve the lives of New Brunswickers, of our communities, and of the environment. We need more than incrementalism, Madam Speaker, and pandering to vested interests. We need a budget that sets us on the path to transformational change. Change by design, change that is just, and change that is long overdue. Thank you, Madam Speaker.